Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Those people will come back again to hunt you down. So the story is very simple. History is repeating itself. If we don't stop them now, they're going to come back and take more and more and more. As they were cruising around and having good time in sky palaces, drinking, being merry, giving themselves a raise, and hunting down other people that dare to just do their job. What is a job of a pastor if not to feed the poor and preach the gospel of hope? And that's exactly what I did. And for that crime, not drinking in a sky palace, not having an amazing time while I was dining in the fancy restaurants like them, for feeding the poor and giving people hope in the biggest crisis that our country has ever faced, where people are committing suicide and turning into drugs and alcohol. I have been penalized, arrested in the middle of the highway by SWAT team, put in jail on concrete, not allowed to be, not allowed to sleep. And I'm facing potentially 4 years jail time. And I've heard that there are more charges are coming my way. Can you imagine? While they are enjoying their lives, they want to bring more charges against the pastor. What have I done to deserve this? I feed the poor and I restore hope for the hopeless. What is a crime here?
Adam Soos here for Rebel News, and for weeks on end, I would see Pastor Artur Pawlowski at least a couple of times a week. He was a headline newsmaker. When it started, originally he was getting in trouble for feeding the homeless, frequent encounters with police. Everything escalated in the viral Get Out video that had millions of views.
Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi.
Finally, we had the dramatic roadside arrest of Pastor Artur Pawlowski. He was in jail, and since that time he is free, and he's actually been touring the United States, visiting churches and talking to important political figures, sharing the cautionary tale of what has happened in Canada. He joins me live in just a moment for an exclusive interview. So great to see you. It's been a little while. We used to see each other a couple times a week. Now it feels like it's been a few weeks, certainly. So where have you been? Fill everybody in on your latest adventures.
Well, it's incredible here in the United States of America. I was supposed to be here just for a few weeks to speak to a number of churches and a number of, conferences. But it turns out that Americans absolutely adore me. They love the fight. They love what is going on if it comes to resistance towards tyranny, because they understand that what's happening in Canada, it's coming to United States as well. So they appreciate anyone that is willing to stand up for freedom, for liberty. I have been touring in about 13 states so far, and more are coming. I got literally hundreds of invitations to come to speak at different conferences, different churches, different halls, Republican meetings, Tea Party meetings. I was invited so far to incredible places. I've met with the governor, William Lee, the governor of Tennessee. I had a meeting with John Rose, the congressman. I had a meeting with Brian Dunaway. He is the district attorney. And I had a meeting with a number of senators, either state senators or U.S. senators. So incredible journey, very sympathetic towards what is happening with me and other Christians, other pastors in Canada. They all are like one voice, willing to stand up and help. They're writing as we speak. Writing letters to Canadian government, pretty much telling them what Senator Hawley said: stop this persecution or you will be counted alongside other nations that are persecuting and prosecuting Christians like China or Russia or Saudi Arabia. So wherever I go, I'm telling you, it's so incredible, such a big difference. I get standing ovations every single time. I mean, I'm here over a month and a half almost, and everywhere I go and I speak almost daily, sometimes twice a day, I get a standing ovation. It looks like American eagle is rising up and it started to flap its wings.
Well, there is certainly a staggering contrast. When we took our Shame on Shandro truck out, which featured video of yourself and Pastor Tim Stevens being arrested, many Calgarians don't know about this story yet. Internationally, whether it be Poland, Brazil, the United States, they view this as an international crisis. It's very serious that in Alberta alone, technically with Pastor Peter Riker, 4 people were technically arrested who were Christian pastors, and every other denomination effectively was exempt. So why is it that Americans, in your opinion, are seeing this, and the world at large are seeing this as serious as it is, and Canadians are somewhat apathetic?
Well, I think Canadians have been living under this bubble of protection from the foreign attacks or interference for such a long time that they take their freedoms for granted. You see, a person like me, we escaped communism. So freedom, of course, is very dear to my heart. As you know my story, I did not emigrate to Canada for money. I emigrated to Canada for freedom. I was sick and tired of corruption. I was sick and tired of being, abuse of power. I mean, that's the bottom line. Communism, socialism, fascism is abuse of power. You have uniformed officers, okay, in the name of the law that would be turning into gangsters. And that's what we're seeing right now. People are asking me quite often, why have I called those nice officers Gestapo, Nazi, communists, and psychopaths? Because they're acting like Nazis. I mean, if you know your story, if you know history, you know that that's how it started. It started by abuse of power. So just because he has a uniform, just because he has a badge on his sleeve or a gun, it does not mean that he can do whatever he wants. There are checks and balances. Every year when I go to Europe, I go to Auschwitz-Birkenau to remind myself, and that's, by the way, the biggest concentration camp built by the Nazis. I go over there to remind myself what people are capable of if you do not put a check on their authority, on their power. So what we are seeing right now is a repetition of history. And Canadians, unfortunately, you have not had invasion on your land for a very long time. You didn't have to defend your country. Polish people, from time to time, over and over again, we had to fight the Russians, the Germans, and all kinds of Ottoman Empire and Mongolians and Vikings, and you name it. So for us, it's a normal thing that when any invaders are coming, we have to rise up, stand up, and fight. The Americans are very similar in nature, because if you know how the country was formed, it was formed in 1776. I mean, that was the defining moment for America, the Declaration of Independence, the rise of patriotism and saying, hey, enough is enough. We're free people created by God equally. I mean, no man should have a right to subdue another man, but that's what we're seeing right now. So I think Americans are more patriotic. They're lovers of freedom. It's in their DNA. They love liberty. They love their country, and they want to stand up and defend what's rightfully theirs. This is what I hear from Americans. What kind of a nation are we going to leave behind for our children and their children? That's a great question that every Canadian should ask themselves. What kind of a nation you want for your children? I mean, listen from a guy with a funny accent that grew up in hell on earth. Do you want that for your grandchildren? I mean, that's a serious question, because today you may be comfortable. Today, maybe you still have a job. Today, maybe your rights are relatively still not under attack. Mine are, other people like me are, but maybe you're still in this bubble zone. But what will happen to your children? What will happen to your grandchildren? What kind of a nation you desire for them? Because I know, Adam, that I desire a nation for my children and my grandchildren, a nation that is brave, strong, free, like our national anthem, God, keep our land glorious and free. Or Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think you mentioned something incredibly important there. Very often for people who don't have kids, the idea of a government stepping in and sort of taking care of everything for you, well, that can sound awfully appealing. The second you have kids, though, and you start to consider about what kind of future will be left for them, your priorities start to shift and you start looking at things in a broader perspective. You look at it whether it's just or not throughout the course of time. Very often people who maybe aren't fans of yours decry you saying Nazis or Gestapos, but you're not saying they're doing what they were doing during the height of the Holocaust. You're using that language to warn people that this is how it starts, right?
That's exactly right. If you know your history, the brown shirts of Adolf Hitler, when you study how the Nazis came to power, it didn't happen overnight. It was a graduate process. Actually, it took Adolf Hitler over 10 years to come to a power that he effectively became the dictator of the German people. We have to always remember that the first victims of the Nazi party were not Poles, were not the Jews, were the Germans. The first concentration camps were built for the German people, Dachau, Buchenwald, and other concentration camps. So when you study history, you know that that's how it starts. First, they were using the brown shirts, just like Antifa is doing right now, and the Black Lives Matter. They were using those types of human, villains to subdue any dissent, any opposition to whatever they were forwarding. And exactly that's what we're seeing right now. Later on, the brown shirts of Adolf Hitler turned into SS. If you know, by 1944, there was almost 1 million SS soldiers. They were just personal guards, fighters for Adolf Hitler. Gestapo, what is Gestapo? People do not know what the Gestapo means. It means secret police. Police officers were turned into Gestapo to subdue the people, any opposition, again, with force, with iron fist. So when I see them repeating the same, history, when officers they swore to uphold the law, to protect and to serve. Serve whom? Us, the people. They're paying their salaries. And I see them breaking the law. For example, in April, during our holiest time of the year, during the Passover, the Easter weekend, when they walked into the church, they've broken 4 laws. So don't tell me that you are a law enforcement agency. You're not. You're gangsters in uniform because you do not care about the law and order. You've broken the law. You walk in like into a restaurant, breaking 3 criminal codes, from the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 176, and you're trespassing. And you're doing this. Why? Because you want to enforce a bylaw, a restriction that, to make sure that I'm wearing a muzzle on my face. No. Sorry, I don't buy that stuff. You have turned into an SS, Gestapo, Nazi style policing, and the law and order doesn't apply anymore. It's what the government, wannabe tyrants, are telling you to do. If I was a police officer, I would never obey such an order. I would just say, sorry, the law says this and this and this, and I am to uphold the law. Therefore, I cannot obey this order. When you look at history, when they ask those German soldiers and the SS and the Gestapo people, why have you murdered women and children? The answer was always the same. I was just following orders. Well, that doesn't cut it. No. You can't just follow blindly orders. You're a human being. You're not a computer chip in your head. You have to realize what you're doing is evil, is wrong, and you're helping those tyrants to have enormous powers that a human being should never, ever have.
Mm-hmm. And we start to see, whether it be Justin Trudeau, federally, provincially, municipally, we start to see politicians clearly pushing towards something. It doesn't get encoded necessarily. Sometimes it does, Bill 10, Bill C6, Bill C36, but other times it's just this general push from above. Sometimes it can be charter violations, and that's what authorities are ultimately called to uphold. But these police will sort of enforce on what they sense is the ideology ideology above them rather than adhering to the letter of the law. We've seen the same problems emerge in the courts where we're seeing all this evidence and even judges saying, well, this is a good point, this is a good point, this is a good point, and then the ruling doesn't seem to take that into account. So certainly I think you're right to point out this problematic trend. As you mentioned, Americans are more aware of this because they're more passion loving and they're more passionate about their freedom. They pursue it fervently and they're proud of their freedom. Canadians kind of had our freedom handed to us. So to get back to you and your current trip, maybe touch on, obviously as a pastor, your primary emphasis is getting out into these churches. Maybe talk about a couple of the churches that you visited, how big the crowds are, what the response is, just so people get an idea of the scale of this trip you're on.
Well, sometimes I'll have 10,000 people listening to me speak. Sometimes I'll have 1,000. I mean, last time I went with my wife to speak at the church, it was standing room only. So people are absolutely passionate about hearing someone that is enduring this hardship. I think more and more Americans are realizing that the enemy is not approaching, the enemy is not at the gate, the enemy is within, where they are surrounded with enemies. And of course, we have to remember that America is a walking target. They hate America. Everyone, every dictator, every villain looks at America, the symbol of freedom, and absolutely hates it. So they want to destroy this. Americans understand that, and they want to rise up and stand up. You know, it's so refreshing, Adam, when I go from one place to another and I'm being welcomed in such an amazing way, and I'm being surrounded by like-minded people. For example, when I go to the conferences and there's like literally thousands of like-minded people, it feels like I am in the middle of savannah surrounded by like-minded lions, and that's empowering. There's so many wonderful leaders in this country, and the exchange of information is also powerful, because here is what the totalitarian government wants. The government wants you to be separated from information, and I grew up in a country like this. So freedom of information, it's a no-no for totalitarian government. When you come to the conferences, when you come to those big rallies, there is an exchange of information. The government hates it. That's why in Canada, they outlawed the protests. As you remember, protest was illegal. Why? Because when you come together, you are empowered. Here is what you're getting from those meetings. I'm not alone. There is others that think like me. They see what I see. I'm not alone. That empowers you. Also, there is an exchange of that information. So, oh, did you see that? Oh, have you heard that? Look at this. That's the truth. The totalitarian governments, they hate the truth, because the truth endangers their life. You see, truth is like a pillar. Pillar stands on its own. It doesn't need any support, but the lie has to be supported by more lies, misinformation, disinformation, and terror. That's what we're seeing right now in Canada. The truth is being censored. We are being deplatformed. I don't know if you have seen, but the arrest video has been taken down by the YouTube. And here is what they sent me. They sent me a letter saying that the video was taken down in order to protect children. Can you imagine? So the children can watch porn on YouTube. Children can slash heads and shoot people and do all kinds of gaming on YouTube, and that's okay. But a pastor in a suit being arrested in the middle of the highway by totalitarian gangsters, that's unacceptable, has to be removed. What that tells me is that the government, evil, wicked government, is afraid that more and more people will see what's really going on.
And you talked about controlling thought, and I think perhaps one distinction that is worth noting, in the United States, you have certainly a biased media, but they come from the entire range of the political spectrum. When you look at Canada with state-funded media, whether it be CBC or the other people receiving these bailouts, the narrative is so one-sided that when I just have a conversation with you, ask you a couple questions and put it on the internet, people will accuse us of being a propaganda wing. We're the only people that are actually talking and having conversations. I'm not sitting here pumping your tire. I'm telling people your story. That's all I've ever done. And people are so one-sided because the media is so collective. We saw CTV running articles saying that your church was terrorizing the neighborhood when you were standing outside singing, and people were targeting your church with hateful attacks. People lit your house on fire. People attacked you, literally physically attacked you in the grocery store. And the media is saying that you're dangerous and you're radicals. And it's all media outlets, with the exception of very few, predominantly Rebel News, daring to say, well, hold on a second, what's the other side of this story here? We've talked with you. We've asked you some tough questions as well. But how much do you think the one-sidedness of media in Canada causes that? Whereas in the United States, you have sort of a polarized media where you can get different perspectives on matters.
And yeah, that's very important for keeping the freedom, because if it's only one-sided story, in Poland, you could be arrested up to 5 years jail time if you dare to listen to European radio. I mean, that was your crime. I want to hear what the other side of the story is telling me. For that, 5 years jail time, 1 year if you were caught with a pamphlet that was not approved by the Communist Party. So we know that Canada has been taken over by communism. We know that anyone that has a brain and open eyes can see by now what's really going on. The chief health officer for the entire nation is a Chinese spy, in my opinion, and he has become the most powerful man in the country. And if people don't see that, another good point is that majority of the chief health inspectors, officers in other countries are also from China. So we see there is an agenda. We see there's something going on. Americans, they also see that. That's why I believe I am being welcomed in such an amazing way, because they want to hear the story. They want to know what is happening across the border, because whatever is happening here in Canada is coming to United States as well. If it comes to media, Americans, they have something that Canadians do not have. They have power to organize themselves. They have amazing, huge platforms. When I am attending conferences, we're talking about 50 media outlets that are carrying the story live, plus the interviews every single time. You can't stop that. Here in Canada, you have Rebel and few other independent media, and that's it. In the United States, we're talking about thousands of independent media outlets, and they're pushing hard. They're pushing as hard as they can. So that information comes out. The moment the information comes out, people start to question what they are seeing. Is it true? Well, let me talk to this doctor. Let me talk to this virologist. Let me talk to this biologist. This person that knows more than me. And that's exactly what is happening during those meetings. I've met incredible doctors, incredible professors, Judy Makovits, of course, the virologist, and other people like her, which are knowledgeable, powerful, and they are not afraid to tell you the other side of the story. And this goes like a wildfire. In Canada, pretty much everything is subdued and controlled. That's why people have been brainwashed for 20, 30, 40 years.
And I mean, I think to your point there's just like the quality of journalism, even when we're covering a sort of mainstream event. For example, Justin Trudeau visiting the city. We were at every location he was at. We were there at length. We covered the entire day. These highly funded government mainstream agencies, they'll show up, set up their cameras for 15 minutes and get one shot. That's not journalism. That's not covering the story. That's getting a shot and sharing some further propaganda about the glorious leader visiting town. We want to ask those challenging questions and be there having those conversations. Who's with you? You mentioned your wife is with you. I know Nathaniel's with you. We just spoke to him. He was stuck. Your eldest son was stuck in one of the COVID jails. He's now back in Calgary. He was with you for quite a few weeks. Who's with you now from the Pawlowski clan?
Well, my wife visited me with my two younger children, and we decided to take a little bit of a break, just to relax and spend some time, a family, good quality time with kids and my wife. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'll be doing this for a few more days, and then I'll keep plowing. I will keep telling what's really going on in Canada, and my wife will go back to Calgary. And, I'm very grateful for the church and the church leadership, Street Church feeding thousands of people every week. And of course, the church, the cave, the fortress of Adullam. I'm very grateful that God has blessed me with amazing Christians that are willing to do what God commanded us to do, which is feed the poor, give hope to the hopeless, and preach the truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. With things starting to open up here in Alberta, hopefully gradually across Canada. Now, who knows if they lock us down again? Lots of people are fearing that. But assuming things hopefully are trending towards remaining open, I think that there is a risk, and what the government certainly hopes is that people forget about this. You'll get some sort of consequence at the court proceedings, and then the government can move on. How important is it that people don't forget about this, and what can we do to keep it fresh in people's memory?
You see, here is what history is teaching us. If they can get away with this, sooner than later, they're going to come with something else. They will cook something up again. And I mean, the next time will be, and it always has been and will always be, more severe. So if you let them off the hook today, be sure of it, they will come more severely against you tomorrow. Those people should be charged for treason. Every one of those politicians should be charged for treason. They have betrayed the trust of the people. They turned against their own people. They've broken every law in the country. And what's, I think, even more important is to remember there are liars and hypocrites. When they have locked us down, off they went vacationing. When they are telling you and me we are in this together, they gave themselves a hefty raise. Those people do not represent us. They do not work for us. They work against us. If you are allowing them to just move on and forget what they have done to you and to your children and your grandchildren for the past 16, 18 months, a year and a half, you are just not listening, because those people will come back again to hunt you down. So the story is very simple. History is repeating itself. If we don't stop them now, they're going to come back and take more and more and more. As they were cruising around and having good time in sky palaces, drinking, being merry, giving themselves a raise, and hunting down other people that dare to just do their job. What is a job of a pastor if not to feed the poor and preach the gospel of hope? And that's exactly what I did. And for that crime, not drinking in a sky palace, not having an amazing time while I was dining in the fancy restaurants like them, for feeding the poor and giving people hope in the biggest crisis that our country has ever faced, where people are committing suicide and turning into drugs and alcohol. I have been penalized, arrested in the middle of the highway by SWAT team, put in jail on concrete, not allowed to be, not allowed to sleep. And I'm facing potentially 4 years jail time. And I've heard that there are more charges are coming my way. Can you imagine? While they are enjoying their lives, they want to bring more charges against the pastor. What have I done to deserve this? I feed the poor and I restore hope for the hopeless. What is a crime here? And yet at the same time, those people are having amazing time of their lives, and it looks like they don't care about anybody and anything except themselves. We cannot forget that.
Yeah.
We just simply cannot forget what they have done, the evil they have done against us.
On that message of hope, obviously, as a Christian pastor, there's always that hope that people come back to the light. For these people, is it too late? Or do you have any suggestions for them as to what they can do? Can they make this right in your eyes?
Oh, of course, they can come in public and say, we ask for your forgiveness for what happened. You know, I'm not sure if all of them know what they're doing. Maybe they were advised to do certain things that they did. The information was coming from more evil people. I'm not sure, but everyone can be redeemed if they would come and say, forgive us for what we have done. We want to repair what the damage that has been done. We're going to we're going to drop all the charges. I'm still facing 20 charges as we speak. For opening church, for feeding the poor. They can always say the charges are dropped, forgive us for what we have done. We didn't know, we didn't have the full information, and let's just move on with our lives. There's forgiveness. I forgive them. I've never hated them. I pity those villains. I pity those politicians because they're going to face my God sooner or later. So I have forgiven them, but I wish that they would just stop persecuting us and prosecuting pastors and Christians. Let us do our job as you are commanded to do your job, to serve and protect. And let me save lives. Let me preach the gospel. Let me save as many people as I can. Please stop persecuting us. Stop persecuting me and our church. We want to move on and have our lives back. Without the backing of someone so powerful as the Rebel News and the ability to tell our story, our side of the story, just like you mentioned before, the mainstream propaganda machinery, the communistic news will not tell our side of the story. They're vilifying us. They are lying to the public. Just like you mentioned before, we just moved to our new location and immediately they started to say that we're terrorizing the neighborhood. Why? Because we would not wear a mask. I mean, that's ridiculous. Those statements are straight from the pit of hell, from the Communistic Party of Canada. So thanks to you and the ability of you communicating the message, telling the truth to the people that are looking for the truth is the most powerful thing. So if you want to help, yes, we need help. We need each other. And that's the message that I'm giving to United States, wherever I go. We need each other. We have to unite. We are more powerful, stronger when we come together. This is not the time for division. This is the time for unity.
Wonderful. And if you want to help in that fight for unity, coming together, again, as always, go to saveartur.com. Artur still has legal battles ahead of him with his existing charges. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, any final words before we wrap up today?
Well, like I said, I forgive the villains. I pray for them daily. May God open their eyes so they can become our greatest allies, friends, and brothers. Also, we know how the story ends, Adam. We know that we win in the end. They've tried that before and they failed before. In the end of the day, we know that when God is for us, who can be against us? Greater is he that is in me than the one that is in them. My heart is filled with hope. I know that in the end, we're going to look back and we will say, wow, it was tough, it was strong, but it was worth it. Canada is worth standing for. Canada is worth fighting for.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much again for joining me. I'm sure our viewers are looking forward to hearing from you after a little bit of a break. God bless and keep up your important work in the United States. And we're looking forward to seeing your face in person. Thanks again, Pastor.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you. I want to thank Pastor Artur Pawlowski for taking time to continue to share his story with us. As always, if you want to help in his legal battles, go to saveartur.com. I want to thank you all for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. I can't emphasize strongly enough just how important it is that we stand up against ridiculous government overreach. COVID jails are just the latest example, and very few people are fighting back. Well, as always, we are rebels and we are resisting, but we need your help. So I need you to go to nocovidjails.com now. You can learn more and chip in to help us as we fight back against government tyranny.